Billionaires will tell you that the key to scaling is hiring A players, but even A players will fail if you delegate in the wrong order. One of the worst things I see is business owners handing over their most important, their most complex responsibilities over to their brand new overseas hire. See, there's a specific order you have to delegate tasks in, and if you mess it up, you'll burn through 3 hires in 1 month, wondering why nobody can think like you do. Ever since I figured out how to build an overseas team the right way to run my e-commerce business that does $1 million a year in revenue, I've been on a mission to help other business owners do the same thing. I'm Zach, founder of Talented. Over the past 2 years, we've placed over 35 savage hires overseas for 7- and 8-figure businesses, so I've seen firsthand what delegation strategies actually make the most money. Today, I'm breaking down that strategy we use to turn a virtual assistant into a right-hand operator. It's what allowed an 8-figure e-commerce client of ours, Chris, to delegate all of the back-end logistics off his plate and focus purely on making more money. It's time to lock in. All right, so there are, I say, 3 mountains of delegation. Now, you start off with execution, and then you move into ops, and then you climb the mountain of autonomy. Now, execution, I would call a hill, not so much a mountain. This is where everyone starts, and so we start at the execution. This will make more sense in a second, but we start at the execution, and then it's a moderate hill, like an easy on all trails. But in order to get to the ops mountain, we have to take the execution hill. So we get to that point, boom, 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 and then now we face the ops hill. Now the ops hill is going to require a compass to navigate it. It's going to have some crevices along the way. There might be a little bit of scrambling, some ladders, but it's not that steep. It's fairly manageable. Now, once we get to the peak of the ops mountain, we face the foot of the autonomy mountain, the largest of them all. Now, the autonomy mountain is snow-capped. It's quite high up there, and it's treacherous. Along the way, you're going to need a Sherpa. You're going to need a lot of different base camps to help you get there, a lot of different resources. But once you get to the top, the view is gorgeous, and the fruits of your labor really pay off. Now, this is an analogy for what we want to accomplish with a new hire. We want to move them through the execution hill, the ops mountain, and finish at the autonomy peak. So let's hop into first execution. So execution tasks are where we always start. You have to start here. I don't care how smart the hire is, how much experience they claim to have, we always start here. I mean, if you're hiring someone from overseas, like across the other side of the country, how can you expect them to jump in and know everything about your business? We have to give them the context, give them the foundation in order to get there, and we do that through the execution tasks. Now, the execution tasks are basically just do exactly what I say. Follow this process step by step. Now, these are the repetitive and the low-risk tasks of the business. Now, we start with these because we're able to build that context over time so that they learn what the business is, what's important to us, my working style, and it's also very easy to quality control. I can see if they're actually competent or not through this process. Essentially, it's a way to buy back your time. The tasks that I'm already doing on my plate, I can delegate these off to this person with my exact process, and they will take them, run with them, and I can then delegate that time, or I can now allocate that time towards the stuff that only I can do that I just bought back. And some people will say, oh no, my A players, these tasks are way too below them. They don't need to be doing those. But then they think they're wasting the talent. But in reality, when you start with these kind of tasks, you're able to build the foundation. The base for the pyramid grows wider to go to the peak. So I'm going to use some examples of businesses that we regularly work with to try to make it real for you. So the first one is an e-commerce reseller. Now, the tasks you'll be delegating as an e-commerce reseller business for the base execution tasks are order processing, tracking info, and sales reports. Now, boring tasks, aren't they? But they get the hands-on experience, the in-the-weeds knowledge of the inner workings of the business. It's hard to be making more complex decisions when you don't even understand how the orders are processed and the sales that are occurring throughout the week. You'll see why this makes a lot more sense once we move on to the second level. But Another example would be a software. If you have a software company, this would be delegating the CRM records to your new hire and customer service tickets to your new hire. If you are a marketing agency, this would be someone scheduling the posts, uploading your assets, and running the analytics reports. Now, we do this to prove their consistency with tasks, but we're also doing it as a way to prove their competency, because someone can interview really well, but once they're faced with like real world problems in your business, they might fall apart. So this is like also a sort of a testing phase before throwing them into the higher risk, more important things. And it can be easily checked for quality if they're doing it the right way. So once they've been able to prove their competency, you build that trust in them, they gain the understanding of your business, is when we can move them on to the next step. Now, this will typically take, I say the first couple weeks. First month is usually how much time I give it before we move on to the next hill of operations. Now, operations is where I want someone to become my clone. This is where it gets fun. This is where you get actual value. Now, some people don't even make it to this step because they think that a VA could never handle this kind of stuff, or they just hired the wrong VA in the first place, but that's for another day. Now, the operations tasks are ones that require context. This is how the initial execution task fits into the puzzle. And here we're giving frameworks instead of SOPs. So like decision-making processes, not just a step-by-step checklist or a step-by-step process. I want them to start thinking like I do. One of my favorite ways to do this is through parallel responsibilities. So the tasks that I'm already doing, instead of delegating them off my plate fully, doing them at the same time. So like, here's what we're trying to do, hand it off to the new hire to handle it, while I also do the same thing. And then we compare our results so we can keep that feedback loop going, telling them how I would have done it differently, why my result is different than theirs, until they make decisions just like I would, get the exact same output as me. I've taken a lot of strategy calls where the business owner says, yeah, I tried to throw someone into doing these complex think like me tasks, these operations tasks, and they couldn't handle it. And it's because they never built that foundation with those executional tasks. So we have to start here second. We always start at the executionary tasks because they never learned your business fundamentals. They never learned how you do things, what's important to you. So how can you expect them to think like you do? Okay, so for an e-commerce reseller, this is when you can start teaching the responsibilities of purchase decisions and warehouse communications and inventory sourcing. Now, these are complex tasks, but because we built up that foundation of doing the order processing, doing the sales reports, it makes more sense in context. Like they know more about what it is they're doing instead of just being presented with this as the first task they're responsible for. If you are a software business, this would be customer success and onboarding, because they went through all these customer service tickets and they saw what's going on in the CRM, so they know what people are struggling with most, how they can best serve them. And that applies over into the customer success and the onboarding. If you're in a marketing agency, this is when you can delegate the responsibilities of media buying and producing creatives, because they saw firsthand what the actual assets were looking like, what the posts looked like as they were scheduled, and the analytics, the back-end reports that actually produced results. Because those boring support tickets, those boring inventory data entry led to their foundation of being able to understand what these tasks actually mean in context, not just what they are at face value. Now, to get these tasks delegated off your plate, it takes months, if not years. This is not a 1 week or like first few weeks thing like the executionary tasks are. You're basically both looking at the same problems and continuing that feedback loop of getting them to think like you do. But once they can start making decisions without you, that's when you know they're ready for the mountain of autonomy. Now, autonomy, instead of thinking like you do, is driving results without me, making decisions that I would not think to make, or making decisions or driving results without my constant input. This is when team members will own their KPIs. They have metrics that they are responsible for optimizing, and they're incentivized to optimize for those KPIs, whether it be through profit share, and their long-term focus. So they're not thinking how I can get in my 40-hour week. They're thinking, how can I increase our profit for next month or next quarter? Level 3 is the promised land. This is where I think we all want to end up as business owners, is having people that can reach autonomy. And that is irrespective of what country they're coming from. The best example of this is is my admin, Danielle. She started with me around 2 years ago doing very low level, like what we talked about in my e-commerce business, the order tracking and the very basic data entry inventory stuff. But now she's gotten to the point where she can make high level purchasing decisions. She's responsible for hundreds of thousands of dollars of purchasing without any of my input, making decisions that are better than what I would make. And it's because we had those continuous repetitions and her incentives are aligned in order to make the company more money. Like, it's going to benefit her in the long run. But to be honest, I would never hire someone if I don't think they can get to level 3, to be autonomous. I don't want a bunch of level 1s. And we're talking about A players. A players are the ones that can reach autonomy. I want a bunch of autonomous people on my company. That's cool. That's like the closest thing you can get to passive income. But I don't think you can get there if you don't start with the other levels, the execution tasks and then the operations think like me tasks. So in the examples of the 3 businesses, for an e-commerce reseller, these responsibilities would be opening new supplier accounts, inventory forecasting, knowing how much to restock, when to replenish our inventory, and figuring out how much we're going to buy to match with what season it's getting checked in, and repricing, actually making the min-max pricing decisions on our inventory. For a software and autonomous worker would be handling retention initiatives. So because they did the onboarding, they did that customer success, they did those low-level tickets, they know what it's going to take, like why people churn and how we can retain them and drive initiatives to optimize for that and have KPIs that align with that. Building a feature roadmap, so what our customers actually care about, and leading the customer success team. Now, if someone comes in and starts leading my customer success team and hasn't done all those previous things, first of all, nobody's going to respect their opinion because they don't actually know the day-to-day, like what our customers actually are looking for. And second, they're kind of just blindly leading because they weren't in the trenches of those base level customer tickets. If it's for a marketing agency, this is when we can start delegating client strategy, campaign execution, and team leadership/training. Same thing with the past one. We can only have someone that is able to execute on the campaigns, for example, if they did that initial media buying. They can't like strategize on what's going to produce a good campaign if they've never done media buying before. After all the VAs we've placed, I've learned how crucial this delegation order really is. I've met too many founders who skip around and then end up back at square one. Either they want someone to run their business from day one and become fully autonomous, or they keep someone stuck at level 1 forever and don't move them up, waste their potential. Level 1 builds the trust and their confidence up. Level 2 is when we teach them to think like we do. And level 3 is when we give them full ownership of the results. But each one is required before hopping to the next. In order to get to that second mountain, we have to climb the first hill. You can't just start climbing the second one. So start at level 1 every time. Even if someone has 10 years of experience, start at level 1. Because experience at another company doesn't mean they understand your business and the way you do things, what your customers are looking for. And if someone actually wants to grow with you, they will have no problem starting at that foundation. But as I touched on, none of this matters if you hire the wrong person. I don't care how good your delegation system is, you cannot teach characters and you cannot teach attitude. That's why I think finding the right overseas hire is actually the hardest part. And most people aren't able to get their hire past level 1 because they hired the wrong one from the start. So if you want to see how we filter through tens of thousands of overseas applicants in just 14 days down to the top 1%, people that could actually become autonomous in your business, click this video right here. It is the next logical step if you're serious about building a team. You didn't click it yet. I'll see you over there. Click right here.